Hello everyone, I'm Jordana Van of Ravenlight Holistic Healing and welcome to Frog as a Spirit Guide. Remember that there is a difference between when something is a totem versus when it's a spirit guide. A totem's a more permanent part of our journey. It represents qualities that are intrinsic to our personality or qualities we're needing to develop and the challenges that we experience in doing so. Spirit guides are more temporary. They're there to help us with specific challenges, but they don't really hang around once we've moved through those challenges. So once we've got the message and done what we're supposed to do, we don't tend to see them anymore. However, something that we thought was a spirit guide can reveal itself as a totem. So basically, this video is the one that I would suggest if you've never really felt anything for frogs before, but suddenly they are showing up everywhere. If frog is actually your totem, this video will probably still be helpful. But again, I'm speaking to frog as more of a temporary assistant rather than a lifelong guide. Also, there are more than 6,000 different species of frogs in the world, so this video is going to be about frog in general rather than about any one specific kind of frog. And I'm also only covering some of frog's messages here, as there are quite a few. If none of the messages I mention apply to you, if you are interested in the messages related to a specific kind of frog, or if you're interested in what it means if frog is your totem, you're welcome to visit my website, which is www.ravenlightholistichealing.com, and schedule an animal totem or spirit guide interpretation with me. So, even those who know nothing about frogs do tend to be familiar with the frog's metamorphosis from an egg to a tadpole to a frog. Most frog eggs are laid in water. The tadpoles live in water until their gills are replaced with lungs and they grow arms and legs. And then the adult frog becomes a creature of both worlds. It can survive in water and on land. In fact, the word amphibian, and frogs are amphibians, means two lives. In metaphysical terms, water represents emotions, creative energy, dreams, intuition. Water flows and changes. If you apply a different temperature, you could have ice or liquid water or steam. Water comes to earth as fog or rain or snow or sleet or hail. It can be a gentle stream or a fierce geyser or a destructive tidal wave. Water is nebulous and unpredictable, and it can frighten us. Our own bodies are mostly water, and if we don't have water to drink, we are going to drop dead fairly quickly. And yet, even though it is something that we need and that composes so much of us, we can drown in only a few inches of the stuff. So water is hard to pin down. Again, it's nebulous. Earth, on the other hand, represents groundedness, patience, permanence, rational thought and logic. It represents security and safety, while water is tied to the unknown. Yes, there are earthquakes and rock slides sometimes, but on the whole, Earth is a whole lot less likely to change or move around than water is. So when frog shows up, it's often the case that you yourself are moving from a time of having been more watery, super emotional, probably frequently confused or unfocused. And you're moving from this to a time of greater security and peace and clarity. Essentially, you're becoming more grounded. You still have access to your emotions, but you're not going to feel overwhelmed by them, and your mind is going to feel clearer. Frog's been my resident spirit guide for a little while. This is exactly what I'm going through. Now, if you've been on a spiritual journey, frog would indicate that you are evolving spiritually. Basically, you are gaining greater clarity and understanding of what flows in your internal waters. The wounds, beliefs, desires that really run you, rather than being at the mercy of your unconscious and acting and reacting in ways that you don't understand. When we come to this place of understanding on our spiritual journey, we eventually hit this lovely crossroads where we cannot exist as the same person that we were before. And sooner or later, like the frog, we experience a literal metamorphosis. We've outgrown the old us. So you don't see things the way you used to. and you behave differently, speak differently, allow yourself to have and do different things. You leave careers that no longer suit you, or romantic partners that you can now accept that you don't belong with. You may change places of residence. You may find your body changing, which, given that the way our body looks and feels really is reflective of how we feel about ourselves, that makes a lot of sense. This does not happen overnight, so you may feel confused or frightened for a while, but eventually you'll get your land legs, so to speak, and everything will settle down again. Frog's metamorphosis from a creature of pure water to water and earth can also mean that all of those creative urges you've been having are finally going to get some traction. Some of those projects are actually going to get done, or projects that have been finished but haven't gone anywhere may finally grow legs. In other words, you may finally find a buyer for your work or someone who wants to market your ideas. You're also likely to stop purely daydreaming and start doing. Now, like snakes, frogs shed their skin, but they do so far more often, at least once a week, and sometimes once a day. In metaphysical terms, our skin represents the self that we show the world. Frog, therefore, may indicate that we've been going through a process of exploring who we really are and getting comfortable displaying those qualities to the world instead of wearing a mask. Essentially, little by little, we are allowing others to see our real selves. It is also the case that frog sometimes means that we want to get out of our current skin. We feel trapped in a particular identity or a role that we're playing because we're afraid of how people are going to react if we show them who we really are, or we don't think that we are allowed to be who we really are. Frog counsels us to be our real selves, even if we aren't 100% sure who or what that is, and we have to try on a bunch of different skins before we figure it out. This is absolutely vital to our health and well-being. The reason for this is that frogs don't drink water. They take in all the moisture that they need through their skin. A frog whose skin is sick or damaged will die of thirst. They also absorb a lot of their oxygen through their skin, so if their skin is unhealthy, they will suffocate. In fact, though scientists don't know for certain, most believe that the reason that frogs shed their skin so regularly is that it keeps it from having a chance to toughen or harden in a way that would make it impermeable to water or oxygen. When we talk about thirst in spiritual terms, we are talking about emotional fulfillment, creative satisfaction. If you feel depressed or empty in this case, it's because your life lacks creative passion. Frog would say that you are pretending to be someone that you are not. You're forcing yourself to wear a skin that isn't true to you. And this lie is preventing you from adequately watering your soul. You aren't being the way that is satisfying for you. You aren't doing the things that are satisfying for you. If you're always pretending to be someone that you're not allowing yourself to have authentic emotional reactions to things either. So all the vital energy that could have gone into being a joyful, creative human is being channeled into maintaining a facade, putting on an act. And this leaves us feeling drained and empty. How can you be happy if you aren't letting yourself have true reactions to things, reacting from here, not here? If you're not letting yourself be creative in the ways you really want to be. 2, when we talk about frogs taking in oxygen through their skin, the human equivalent is being true to who we really are so that we can feel as though life supports us. Breath equals life in the most fundamental sense. So when we unrelentingly wear a fake skin, we don't have the opportunity to see that we are meant to be loved just as we are. We've never tried being who we are. And we live in eternal fear that if we stop being this fake person, if we really just let go and decide to be ourselves, that things are suddenly going to begin to go very, very wrong. People will attack or abandon us, or we won't make any money, or some other bad thing will happen. And yet, it is inevitably the case that the fake skin begins to make us feel suffocated. We try so hard to be this person that we think is going to keep us safe that we don't do the things that would really bring us to life, that would make us feel invigorated, that would be a breath of fresh air. And that's when things actually do begin to go wrong. Not because we're taking a risk and bravely being our real selves, but because we are not. This is why when frog shows up, it is almost always imperative to ask yourself if you're in any way living a lie, and then find a way to live your truth. Frogs are known as an indicator species. This is because they're so sensitive to changes in the environment that there is a verifiable link between the health and prevalence of frogs and the health of a particular environment. So as I just talked about, frogs absorb oxygen and water through their skin, and so if the air or water is contaminated with pollutants, the frogs living in the environment are going to quickly sicken and die. This is one of those cases where a deceased spirit guide becomes particularly telling. So if you're running into a lot of dead frogs, this is the message that is probably most important to you. Now, the point I'll talk about in a second can still be meaningful, even if all your froggies have been perfectly healthy and happy, but it is particularly likely if you've been seeing dead or ill frogs. Anyway, what we are talking about here is a critter that is super sensitive to toxic environments. So when frogs start showing up for you, frog may be indicating that you are in a toxic environment. You may be surrounded by people with really negative attitudes, who are especially mean or cruel or close-minded. The kind of people who you're having a great day and it seems like they go out of their way to point out to you all the reasons you shouldn't be happy. These are also likely to be the kind of people who dump all their troubles on you and make you feel really used, and the idea of being anywhere near them makes you want to run screaming in the opposite direction. Their toxic vibes are actually affecting your system. So you're probably beginning to feel depressed or sad or exhausted or cranky, even when they aren't around. So if you can recognize that this is true for you, it's time to start asking yourself, why on earth are you subjecting yourself to this misery? Inevitably, the issue is either that your boundaries are weak or non-existent. For example, perhaps you've never actually told these people that no, you do not wish to sit there and listen to their negativity. And you need to learn that your time and energy is valuable and that you don't have to surrender it when asked. Or the environment may be completely wrong for you and it's time to find a new one altogether. We really are meant to be happy, guys. We're not meant to just sit there and suffer amidst other people's negative attitudes and low vibes. This isn't meant for us. Now, while not all frogs have tongues and therefore use their little hands to grab prey, most of us have somewhere seen a frog shooting out its tongue, which is quite sticky, latching onto prey and then sucking it in with one bite to be swallowed whole. And this actually all takes less than a second. Frogs are also very, very loud. We have tons of frogs here. And even with the air conditioner running and all the fans running during the summer, we can still hear them. So frogs are so loud that the male frogs who sing to attract a mate can actually be heard up to a mile away. So if there's something that you've been wanting and aren't getting, frog would suggest that you use your voice, use your tongue, tell people you're interested in particular opportunities. Talk about what you can do and what you want. If you're normally shy and quiet, find the guts to be bold and loud and unignorable. Also, if you've had any interest in singing or vocal performance of any kind, frog would be a clear affirmation to do it. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the next American Idol, but it does mean that singing or vocal work will bring you something important. It could mean that you'll simply find joy in singing itself, and finding things that make us happy for no other reason than that we enjoy them is a seriously wonderful and underrated thing. It could instead mean that you join a local choir and you meet the love of your life there. You could meet your new boss doing karaoke. Or you could indeed be the next singing sensation. Either way, Frog would strongly suggest that if you've had any kind of yearning to sing or use your voice in a particular way, that you should do so. By the way, frogs are also incredible little romantics. While frogs do croak as a territorial warning, what we hear most often, that summer cacophony, is them attempting to summon a mate. So, ladies and gents, if you've been wondering over the best way to win the heart of someone in whom you're romantically interested, Frog would suggest that you try music. Another interesting thing about that song, because frogs tend to make the greatest racket right before and during the rain, they are referred to in a lot of folklore as rain bringers. Essentially, people thought that frogs brought the rain with their song. What's actually going on is that most frogs need to lay their eggs in water, and frog sex essentially amounts to the male grasping the female releases the eggs, the male releases sperm into the water where it penetrates the eggs, and voila, the frog species continues. When it rains, there's going to be a lot more water, and because frogs can somehow sense when rain is approaching, they start calling for mates right before it happens to get a head start on the mating process. If that rainstorm is going to only last for 5 minutes, they want to be ready. So while the truth of the louder frogs equals rain observation is certainly fun, and you are welcome for that nifty fact to share at your next cocktail party, what really matters here as far as a spirit guide goes is the folkloric association. In metaphysical terms, rain, or any water in fact, is related to emotional experience and creative flow. Frogs often symbolize that you have a lot of emotional work to do, and it is time to really begin feeling your feelings so you can understand how you are experiencing your life and both let go the things that are no longer serving you and connect with what you really need in order to be happy. If you've been stuffing your emotions down and refusing to feel the things that frighten or sadden you or stress you out, Frog would tell you you aren't going to be able to suppress this stuff much longer. You can either be brave and choose to really, truly look at all this stuff you've been repressing, or things are going to begin happening in your life that are going to be so intense that you're not going to have a choice but to feel those emotions. So if you've already been working on feeling your feelings, Frog might symbolize a time of feeling more emotional in a joyful way. You may find yourself laughing more or enjoying more cathartic crying jags, or simply feeling more genuinely moved by your experiences. It's also the case that you may be helping to bring the rain for others. You may find yourself suddenly in the position of a counselor where people feel safe crying on your shoulder or opening up about their experiences in other emotional ways. This could mean that your friends are suddenly needing you to be there for them a lot more, or that every unhappy person in the grocery store seems to be able to find you and wants to tell you their whole history. If holding space for others to feel their feelings is something that you really enjoy, then wonderful. On the other hand, if it's not something that you can do without being subsumed by those emotions, Frog might be reminding you of the hazards of being thin-skinned and the need to place yourself in situations that don't involve you being energetically poisoned. Just because someone is sad or unhappy and in need of counseling does not mean that you have to be the one to provide that for them. If you can't handle it without being sucked into the misery yourself, it is not something you are meant to do at that time. And they are meant to find someone else to help them or to figure out how to help themselves. It is not your responsibility to save or heal anyone. Now, on a cheerier note, let's talk about the frog's incredible jumping ability. Frogs can leap over 20 times their own length, which would be like you or me being able to launch ourselves 100 feet. If there's something you've been wanting to do, but which requires a leap of faith, Frog would be a very strong affirmation to do it. You may not think you have what it takes, but if you're feeling like this could be something that you're just meant to do, then do it. You will probably be far more successful than you dreamed. 2, like snakes, frogs have teeth, but the primary purpose is to grip the prey as it's swallowed whole. They can't chew, they just bite and gulp. Metaphysically, teeth are linked to chewing things over. Our bodies are so metaphorical, it's crazy. So, considering all the options before deciding what to do. If you've got issues with your teeth, one of the first things I would be asking you is if you overanalyze everything and always fear you might make the wrong decision. This isn't the only thing that causes teeth issues, by the way, but it's one of the biggies. Anyway, since frogs swallow things whole, what we're talking about is just doing something that you want without getting bogged down in all the hows and whys and what ifs. If it calls to you, just do it. Swallowing things whole is how frog nourishes itself, and it's a good bet that it's telling you to do the same thing. Stop picking your desires and plans apart and just act already. Swallow it down, and you'll wind up feeling deeply fulfilled. Now, one of the most fun things about spirit guides is that it's one of the places the universe shows its sense of humor. When the universe sends us a spirit guide, sometimes the message is very, very deep, like the earth-shattering, cataclysmic, soul quake sort of thing. But other times, the message is tied to something that just seems frivolous, like a turn of phrase we often use, or a bit of folklore with which we're familiar. For example, bear sometimes shows up to point out to people that they are perceiving their situation as unbearable or beyond bearing, or that someone in their life is being an utter bear, and that they need to take steps to deal with these situations and the emotions they're feeling before things get a lot worse. Snake sometimes shows up to show someone that they need to listen to a gut instinct they've been ignoring about someone who's being a real snake in the grass, or a snake oil salesman. This is one of the reasons that when an animal starts to show up in your experience, thinking as creatively about the experience as possible is going to be your best route to understanding. So with frog, one of the more fun associations I've observed recently has to do with the fairy tale The Frog Prince. More and more lately, I hear people say things like, I had to kiss a lot of frogs before I found my prince, or I thought he was a prince, but it turned out he was just a frog. Now, if you've actually read the full story, you'll know that the princess was a rather selfish creature, and you'd kind of wonder why on earth the prince married her. But those who just remember the idea of a frog that's actually a prince may find that frog comes into their experience to tell them something about their love life. So it may be that you are dating someone that you keep expecting is going to turn into a prince or princess, but they just keep disappointing you. People often fall in love with the idea of what someone could be instead of who they actually are, and this doesn't end well for anyone. If you find yourself constantly disappointed by your romantic partner, it may be that you are wrong for each other, and Frog's telling you that the time has come to admit that to yourself. If you find you're constantly trying to change your partner to make a prince out of a frog, you're going to wind up exhausted and frustrated. People have to choose to change for themselves if the change is going to endure. Otherwise, they just tend to go back to being their old self at the earliest opportunity. It could also be that you've become rather jaded about love, and Frog would be telling you to be more optimistic, that a lot of the people that you're labeling frogs and therefore unsuitable for romance could actually be revealed as your perfect prince or princess if you got to know them. So I hope this video has given you guys all a good idea of Frog's more prominent messages when it starts showing up in your life. As I mentioned earlier, you are welcome to schedule a session with me if you'd like more information. I work with people all over the world to help them understand the unique messages of their animal totems and spirit guides, and to also help with physical and emotional healing, dream interpretation, figuring out what you were put here to do in this lifetime, and a billion other things. And I would love to work with you as well. So if you're interested in working with me, I work over phone and Skype. You can visit my website, which is www.metamorphosis, ravenlightholistichealing.com. It'll tell you exactly what I do, what to expect, what I charge, how to book a session with me, and all the good stuff. You can also follow my work on Facebook and Instagram at Ravenlight Holistic Healing. Make sure you look for my business page and not my personal info, because I do not respond to requests on my personal page. Also, while I do understand that you might like my professional opinion on your spiritual situation, I do not provide this outside of a formal session under any circumstances. So if you are interested in my opinion or guidance, please book a session with me. Have a gorgeous day, my darlings. Cheers.